DS9 had the strongest first season of its era, by which I mean it showed up. The atrociousness of TNG, Voyager, and Enterprise in their first season means that DS9's mediocre first season stands head and shoulders above them. But it is still nevertheless mediocre. I pulled up my folder full of Season 4 episodes and went down the list. Way of the Warrior, The Visitor, Hippocratic Oath, Indiscretion, Rejoined, Starship Downed, Little Green Men, The Sword of Kahless, Our Man Bashir. First 10 episodes, if you count Way of the Warrior as 2. Compare that to Season 1, Emissary, Past Prologue, A Man Alone, Babel, Captive Pursuit, Q-less, Dax, The Passenger, Move Along Home. Note how many of the Season 4 group depend upon character as the strength to enhance the concepts. People don't remember The Visitor because of its fantastical plot, but because it's about a son and a father. Or Indiscretion that, for lack of a better term, humanizes a monster to the point that people defend the character. And now look at Season 1. One could argue that Season 1 had the harder job because it had to establish character. But of those, only Emissary and arguably A Man Alone, Captive Pursuit is debatable only because O'Brien is already established as a character, really do much to establish these new characters. The reason the Best of Both Worlds Part 1's cliffhanger is so powerful isn't just because the Borg are a threat and they've taken our own captain to unwittingly aid the enemy, but because we care about the fate of Captain Picard, and because Riker's decision to fire has been the culmination of the entire episode's human insight. It's not enough to boldly go. We have to care about who's boldly going. We kick off with Kira and Bashir coming back on a runabout, talking about how impressed Kira was with Bashir bringing a dead patient back to life. Bashir takes the compliment in the spirit that is intended, by which I mean naked worship of his incomparable genius. Siddig succeeds as an actor, not going over the top with Bashir's sanctimonious self-congratulations, but it is not enough to rescue this cringe-inducing moment. Thank God there's a ship in distress to distract us. Although then again, it could have fallen past the event horizon of his ego. Bashir sees to an unconscious woman, who upon awakening tells him not to open the door to where the prisoner responsible for this fire is. But he's a doctor, so he has to. I'm sure a lot of people wanted to do that to him by now. After saying, "Make me live," in a creepy-ass way, the patient dies. Ask for one little thing around here. After the titles, that woman, Kajata, is awakened in the infirmary, saying DS9 was the destination of the prisoner she was transporting, Vantika, which he technically reached, albeit as a corpse. Still, she wants to be absolutely sure. He has faked his death so many times you might think he's an X-Men. I don't think he was a vampire, but I suppose it can't hurt. By the way, since I know someone will want to point it out, this lady is Natoth, who is Jakar's second aide on Babylon 5, who after the first aide had an accident with an airlock probably was used to checking for unwelcome surprises. Meanwhile, Quark flirts with Dax, to the disgust of Odo. The pair banter, which we can put down as character building, or at least character dynamic. During this, Odo mentions the Duridium shipment coming through, which is overheard by a Starfleet gold shirt who is not happy. This is Primin, and it seems he's a Starfleet representative when it comes to station security, and he's concerned about security over Duridium. See, some aliens are dying out and they need that stuff, and, well, since they have warp drive, we can't just sit on the sidelines and let them die like we normally would. This is why Vantika probably wanted to come here. The Duridium will fetch a high price on the black market for the desperate and the wealthy. Sisko meets with Primin alone about this, but it's not to snub Odo, it's to make things clear.
If you want my opinion...
Actually, I don't. You and I are guests of the Bajorans, Lieutenant. You don't have to forget what you learned at the Academy. You just don't throw it in anyone's face here.
Michael Piller contributed heavily to the script, which is why the episode does have moments like these that are establishing things, like the way that Sisko sees Starfleet's role on the station. After all, this isn't a star base. It's an open port. The whole point of the name Deep Space Nine is to indicate that for the Federation, this is the fringe, deep space. We don't want to come stomping out here in our pith helmets telling the locals they're doing everything wrong. So Primmin heads down to Odo a bit humbled after this chewing out and works to try to start things over. But his phrasing, "let's see if we have anything to work with," still carries a bit of arrogance. So Odo assures him security is just fine. He has everything under control.
What?
Perfectly under control. All active memory has been accessed and purged, a trick that Vantika pulled before. At the discussion in Ops, she says that all active memory is probably being shunted into some minor access, in this case, the temperature control on one deck. But it's not enough to convince everyone that a dead man's responsible for this. Sometimes it takes a little bit more persuasion. Well, she is adamant that this guy has a drive for survival that makes a cockroach look frail. So they'll keep looking for the dead guy, but not Odo, because he tells Sisko he's going to quit over this insult with Primmin. So Sisko points out, look, you can't expect Starfleet not to put someone out here to look out for their interests too. They're investing a lot of resources, personnel, even a new theme song.
Who's in charge?
In joint operations like this one, you are.
I could live with that arrangement.
You drive a hard bargain, but I'll settle for lording my authority over others. In furtherance of the plot, Dax finds research on the humanoid brain. But the real action is in Quark's tonight after closing, when he gets grabbed from behind by someone demanding to know if he's got the mercenaries to help steal the Duridium shipment. This must be Vantika. I've heard her coming back from the dead because of grave robbers, but not coming back to be a robber. Dax shows Bashir her discovery, and he says, at a side of Spock pulling that trick in Wrath of Khan, putting one's consciousness into another's brain to live on after death doesn't happen.
Well, there's plenty of room. A humanoid only uses a small portion of the brain.
That was always a weird urban legend, wasn't it? About not using all of your brain. What would be the point of growing a great big brain and then not using all of it? It's not like it's boobs or anything. Ah, man, check out the size of that frontal lobe. Well, they quickly conclude that Kajana is probably the one carrying his brain around. She's the same species. Plus, earlier, Bashir said that he'd tried to contact her last night, but she didn't answer. She made up some excuse about being asleep. They share their suspicion with Sisko, Odo, and Primmin, so naturally she gets locked out.
What kind of fool are you?
My own special variety.
He's our Odo, even if he is looking a little gaunt today. Pissed off, she decides to go watch Quark, since he's most likely going to be involved. And that's because he is. But she gets pushed off the upper balcony and is nearly paralyzed. Well, while she's recovering, Sisko and Bashir figure, hey, as long as she's in the shop, why don't we check to see if there's any proof that she's been possessed by a ghost? Well, Dax is doing one better, checking under the fingernails of the body to see if some tech transmitted some tech into her skin to tech her brain, while Sisko says, tech please. But yeah, she finds a teeny tiny little generator that could send a signal containing all his thought patterns into someone else as a last-ditch effort to save his life. Man, I would have trouble buying that idea if an Avengers villain was being retconned to have survived. Never mind here. Well, the preparations for the delivery are being seen to, although Quark is currently leading a group of mercenary thieves to a stolen runabout. So things aren't going so well with security. Well, isn't Quark surprised to find Dr. Bashir waiting for them in the runabout? But not to worry, assuming you're a thief. Turns out that he was the one that was infected with Vantika, and Kajota was just a red herring. Well, someone is working on trying to track this guy down.
What the hell are you doing in there? I told you to sweep the docking bay again.
Knowing Odo, he probably meant with a broom. But turns out Primmin had a good idea. Apply Odo's approach of attack the entire system instead of the part that's heavily defended. He figured out that Vantika would go for something non-essential that could screw up the whole station for a while, and sure enough, he went and found it. Or he replicated this thing to mess with Odo's head. I wouldn't rule that out completely. Well, Dex has figured out something is up with Bashir. He vanished and left behind his comm badge, and a quick check reveals that he's the one taking out an unauthorized runabout. Don't shoot us, we're just space UPS. After killing the bridge crew, Vanica Bashir beams over, but the attempted escape is blocked by a tractor beam from the station. A conversation is struck with Cisco, who wants Bashir back. Avantika wants the ship and all the Deridium. He threatens to try to escape by going to warp, even if that'll likely destroy the ship. So, Dax is going to disrupt the neural patterns in what raises this plotline from non-credible to completely laughable. Vanica figures that they're up to something and plans to go to warp anyway, guessing that Cisco would never risk spreading Deridium all over the place. It's so hard to clean up after all. But the mercenary at the controls doesn't want to risk being killed. No, he decides to go for certainly killed. But Dax sends over her brain scrambler beam that puts Bashir back in control of his body, although oblivious of his situation. It's only brief, though. He barely gets the shields down in time so that he can be beamed back.
It's okay. It's me.
How did you know that wasn't Bashir? It wasn't? They put him in a science transporter exorcist machine to remove the tech that keeps those brain patterns inside of Bashir, so that he'll be fully himself again. All that remains of Vanica will then go into that little disc.
All right, I'm opening the trap now. Don't look directly into the trap. I looked at the trap, Ray.
And with the process of success, Kajota disintegrates the disc, bringing an end to Vanica and the episode. The post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to Bashir for his self-satisfaction at the beginning, and bleed over for the awful Vanica performance that's given late in the episode. That was not Siddig's Emmy moment. Bashir also gets an I Am Legion award for being possessed by a dead man, which also gives us our Lazarus of the Week, even if it is a short-lived one. Final score for The Passenger is 3 out of 10. Watchable television, but DS9 is better than watchable television. I singled out moments of growth for the show precisely because they were so rare. The deficiency of strong character tie-in to the plotline only highlights the absurdity of said plotline. I'm Possessed by an Alien has just been done better.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
And the light is green, trap is clean.